media because in the past few decades, media has changed dramatically. So, what is media? Well, according to Oxford Languages, media is all means of mass communication. Mass communication is the process of spreading and exchanging information into a large, geographically dispersed audience. Media includes print and broadcast forms, but today, digital platforms like the internet and social media dominate daily life. Media has four main functions. First, it gives us information, news, and updates on politics, culture, and society. Second, it provides entertainment, movies, music, and games that let us relax and connect emotionally. Third, it acts as surveillance, monitoring events, preventing crime, and warning us about dangers. Finally, it shapes our socialization, teaching us values, norms, and behaviors that we often copy from what we see. In the past, the TV, radio, and newspapers were the main platforms for media. But times have changed. Hardly anyone reads newspapers anymore, and most media platforms have moved online. With digital media, anyone can publish information instantly, and while this may seem like a good thing, it also creates serious problems. The biggest challenge is the spread of fake news and unverified information, stories that can influence opinion, damage reputation, and create confusion. Let me share a few examples. For example, last year, doctors in Korea went on a collective strike. Regarding the issue, there was a fake news about blacklist documents for medical residents. The incident began on March 7, 2024, when a document claiming to be an internal paper from the Korean Medical Association with the president's seal was posted on the online community DC site. The document included instructions to create a blacklist of residents who did not participate in collective action. This caused public outrage and even human rights concerns. But later, it was confirmed the document was a forgery. By then, however, trust had already been damaged and tensions grew within the medical community. Second issue is about unconfirmed information. For example, J.K. Rowling. Media reports claim she was attacking transgender people, but they often ignore the context of her actual statements. The result was a wave of misunderstanding, public anger, and harassment. Even after clarifying her stance, 3 trans rights activists posted her home address on Twitter. This case illustrates how media can also manipulate not only information, but also people's emotions and behaviors, especially teenagers whose cognitive abilities are not fully developed. Lastly, we also see biased information in coverage of transgender athletes. Research from the University of Waikato found that news outlets are neutrals on these issues. For example, when covering debates about inclusion in sports, media often focuses on one side and neglects the challenges faced by cisgender women or the economic fairness aspects. The media is not fair or balanced on these debates. In rapidly changing world, finding dependable information and avoiding false information is becoming extremely challenging. Social media floods us with headlines, rumors, and emotional messages, blurring the line between fact and fiction. That's why critical thinking is essential. As Christians, we believe truth is grounded in God's design, not just in popular opinion. The Bible reminds us, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by renewing of your mind. This means we must not blindly accept what the social media shows us, but ask questions, test what we hear, and hold on to what is good and true. If we use wisdom, compassion, and discernment, media can once again be a tool to build up communities rather than tear them down. This is it for my part, and now I'll hand over the stage back to our host, Clinton.
Thank you, Gia, for the detailed presentation. As Gia said, media has changed and evolved in the past few decades from offline to online. But as a result, other media outlets appear spreading fake news and uncertain information. To dive more deep into this topic, we have chosen the anti-discrimination law as our example. Let's welcome our next speaker, Michael, to talk more about the anti-discrimination law. Let's welcome him with a round of applause.
Hello everyone, my name is Michael Lee from Korean International Christian School, Socho campus, and I'm currently in grade 11. And also, I am one of 6.8 million Instagram followers of Mr. Charlie Kirk, so I'm very looking forward to meet him in person, and I'm very honored to be standing here. Anti-discrimination law was shown by the US when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was initiated. This act was to protect individuals from racism, sexism, or any other different kinds of discrimination. But the core of this act changed as time went by. You see, anti-discrimination law is now used not only to protect LGBTQ plus communities, but also to attack individuals or organizations that does not accept anti-discrimination law. Now, then, what does anti-discrimination law have to do with our theme, media? Anti-discrimination law has been framed by the media as if it is a necessary backbone of our human society. The mainstream media also attacks individuals or organizations that oppose anti-discrimination law. Let's look at some examples. In this news article, the New York Times says that President Trump signed 2 orders to dismantle equity policies. Now, what did President Trump sign? He signed to withdraw the policies which were instituted under the former President Biden's administration. Former President Biden allowed schools to teach about transgender people, allowed them to use women or men's bathroom, or even allowed transgender athletes to participate in the women's sports. But when President Trump came to the office, he set everything straight. However, in this news article, the New York Times still criticized Trump, saying that this action is aimed at reversing decades of systematic inequities. They also say that former President Biden extended protection under the Civil Rights Act, which I really do not understand, because telling children to choose whether they want to change their sex or gender, even without their parents' permission, doesn't sound like a protection or even freedom to me. The mainstream media is misleading the public, as Gia said, by doing biased reporting. As a result, according to Statista, 80% of the people in Western Europe countries, Canada and Australia says that homosexuality needs to be accepted by our society. Through these examples, we can obviously tell that mainstream media is misleading the public, framing anti-discrimination law as if these people need more protection, or as if anti-discrimination law is a significant part of our society. The mainstream media also attacks individuals or organizations, framing them as the part of the discrimination. But we shouldn't lose sight for the truth. Individuals like Charlie Kirk, President Trump, or even all the legendary speakers here are fiercely fighting for the truth. So as us Christians, we shouldn't lose hope, we should also be brave, and we should fight for the truth. This is it for my part, and I'll hand over the stage back to Quentin.
Thank you, Michael, for the informative presentation. With what Michael said, we can see that the media can be very misleading. We should be aware to not blindly trust the media. Our next speaker, Christina, is going to be talking about the anti-discrimination law in the United States and in South Korea. Let's welcome her to the stage with a round of applause.
Whenever people talk about an anti-discrimination law, it sounds really good at first. I mean, who wouldn't want fairness, right? But when we look closer, especially at what happened in the United States, things aren't that simple. In America, this law got a big push because of what people call woke culture. It was supposed to protect minorities, which sounds fair. But things started to change fast. More and more people, especially young people, began identifying as LGBTQ. The problem is that woke culture often claims that their feelings matters more than the truth. Instead of solving problems, it created new ones. Something as normal as bathrooms became a big fight. Like, should there be a third toilet? Under the anti-discrimination law, if a man says that he's a woman, he can enter women's bathrooms and locker rooms. Sadly, there have been cases where this rule was abused, often leading to crimes. schools became another problem. Like we have witnessed in Paris Olympic, the anti-discrimination law brought reverse discrimination against ordinary people. For example, if a transgender male enters women's events, female athletes often face unfair competition. Schools changed too. In some states, LGBTQ topics were added to textbooks. Minors could even get formal treatments without their parents' permission. People began to get confused about language too, like what gender means or which words are safe to use. As Shirley Kirk often asks, what is women? Now, people can't even define what is a woman. Ordinary conversations suddenly felt risky. When Donald Trump became president, he pushed back against much of this. The first thing he said was that the American government will recognize only two genders, male and female. This may seem like the issue had quieted down, but the debate is still dividing the society. And here in Korea, Congress has been trying to pass our own anti-discrimination law for 19 years. Year after year, it comes up, but luckily, it didn't pass so far. Why? Because churches have been objecting strongly. On October 27, 2024, over 1 million Christians joined to come against the anti-discrimination law in Seoul. I was there with my family, standing with many others to protect freedom and our future. Recently, there was a push for daycare guidelines that would present same-sex and transgender families as normal. There was a petition, but sadly, the petition didn't get enough support. Our freedom is shrinking. People deserve the right to raise their kids without schools or the government forcing them that certain values must be accepted. South Korea's president said that while anti-discrimination law is an important task, people's livelihood and the economy are more urgent. This made it seem like the issue had quieted down. But in fact, it hasn't gone away. We still need to pay attention. And it's our responsibility to carefully balance protecting rights with defending freedom. That's all for my part, and I'll give my control back to the host. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for the eye-opening presentation. As Christina said, the anti-discrimination law had a major push due to the woke culture, which was meant to defend minorities. But as time passed, people started identifying as LGBTQ, especially the youth. This was because they thought their feelings mattered more than the truth. Now, speaking of the truth, how do we Christians living in modern society discern the truth? Our next speaker, Elliot, is going to give us an insightful perspective about the truth. Let's welcome him with a round of applause.
Hello everyone, my name is Elliot and I'm grade 9 at Korean International Christian School, Socho campus. Today, I want to share about what is truth and how can we figure out what's real and what's not. So first, let's talk about what is really truth. When people say truth in the world, most of them think that it's just facts or information like news reports, scientific finding, or historical records. However, as Christina, Michael, and Gia said before, these facts or information are unreliable in today's society. Because of fake news, biased reporting, and misleading headlines, it's harder than ever to know what's real. Another challenge is that some ideas are repeated to us so often that we accept them without asking questions. For instance, in culture, people today believe everything that artificial intelligence says as if it were absolute truth. However, the AI often suggests inaccurate information and can even mislead people. For example, there was a case in the United States where a man asked ChatGPT for an alternative to salt. The AI suggests sodium bromide and he followed for 3 months. As a result, he suffered from bromide poisoning, showing symptoms of paranoia, and was eventually hospitalized in a psychiatric ward. This case clearly shows that how dangerous it can be to rely on AI information uncritically. In society, we sometimes hear fixed ideas like getting into top university or having a certain job is the only way to succeed. These things sound true because we've heard them so often, but they are not based on reality. But for Christians, what is truth? Truth is not defined as what's trending or what most people claim. Truth must line up with the Bible. The difference between worldly truth and Christian truth often appears in many areas, but as an example, the worldly truths often tell us to compete, to climb higher, and to prove you're better. But Bible teaches something very different. To love one another, to serve and to dominate, and to walk humbly with God. For example, Jesus said, love your neighbors as yourself. And Jesus promised that the Holy Spirit, the Helper, will be sent to us to guide us into all truth. So, real truth should reflect God's character, so if something is loving but ignores fairness, or fair but lacks love, it is not complete truth. So, how can we figure out what's real in a world full of mixed messages, conflicting claims, and AI-generated contents? First, fact check carefully. Don't believe something just because it feels convincing, emotional, or popular. Look for evidence, trustworthy sources, and confirmation. Second, consider different perspectives. Instead of relying on one voice, explore different viewpoints so you can form a more balanced understanding. Lastly, compare with biblical truth. For Christians, it's important to ask whether a message reflects God's principle like love, justice, or humility, or it pushes harmful attitudes like hatred, selfishness, or pride. By applying these steps, fact-checking, consulting different perspectives, and comparing with biblical truths, you can better navigate a world shaped by technology, culture, and personal opinion, and discover what is truly real and trustworthy. This is all my part, and I'll give my control back to our host.
Thank you, Elliot, for the insightful perspective about the truth. So, in conclusion, I'd like to read Romans 12:2. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. His good, His pleasing, and perfect will. Yes, the first thing that we must do is not conform to the pattern of this world. Now, that is easier said than done. How do we not conform to the pattern of this world? Well, by renewing our mind. So, the first conclusion that I could say as a student is that we should renew our mind by reading the Bible and praying at least an hour a day, which we're being taught in school. Secondly, as Elliot mentioned, we should search on the topic ourselves rather than relying or depending on AI or the media too much. And lastly, definitely not the least, when we see these false or fake claims influencing our culture, we should be brave enough and passionate enough to stand up against it, just as how this great event has taught us. And finally, I'd like us to read Philippians 4:8 all together. On count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is true, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. This is Korean International Christian School, Socho campus, and thank you for listening to our presentation.